Everybody, welcome to week 10 material. This week, we're going to be focusing in on just one topic. It is going to be the introduction of animation. Now, to be clear, there are entire animation courses and programs and schools that all focus in on just the art of animation specifically. This week, all we're going to really be doing is just introducing ourselves to the basic tools that you need to know if you want to do animation within Maya. So I have a scene here with a sphere, and we're going to animate the sphere like a bouncing ball. So I'm just going to go to my front view first. I'm going to go ahead and translate the Y up to 12. There we go. Next thing I'm going to do is come down here to my timeline. Whenever you're using animation in Maya, you're going to be focusing a lot down here. This is the animation timeline for Maya. This is how many frames you have available for you at this moment in time. You can change this. You can make this, it's currently at 108 frames. Maybe I want to make this 300 frames, and then I can select here to extend the timeline out to 300 frames if I want to, and so on and so forth. For our purposes, I'm just going to keep it a simple 120. That should be more than enough for what we're going to do with this bouncing ball here. Next thing to do is to ensure that we are at, you can make this whatever you want, 24, 30, 60, beyond 60 if you want to. But for the purposes of this demo, we're going to keep it at the default 24 frames per second. We can also jump into the animation settings right over here. This little guy is with the gear icon. Be aware that changing the frames per second does change the calculations of the kind of frames that I'm doing here. I'm working with 24. If you work with 30 or 60 or more or less, then that changes the calculations to replicate the results that I have here. And here we can double check and make sure our frame rate is where we want it to be, which is 24 frames for this demo. The playback start and end is something that we can focus in on down here. As you can see, that changes the playback start and end from 0 to frame 110. And this changes this value right here. In our case, we're going to keep it concise and unified with 120, 120. The final thing to take note of in this menu is under playback, which is playback speed. You want to make sure you don't have play every frame, or your animation is going to be a lot faster than you think. You want whatever frame rate you have times 1. And we're going to save. Next thing we're going to do is make sure that we begin at frame 0. You don't have to begin at frame 0 if you don't want to, but when it comes to animation, it's good practice to start at frame 0, especially if you're working within Maya as opposed to frame 1. Starting at frame 0 is a little bit better. So let's begin animating this ball and have it look like it's bouncing up and down. To do so, we start at frame 0. We make sure our timeline is at frame 0 and not frame 52 or 78 or 19 or anything like that. Frame 0. We have our sphere selected, and I'm going to go ahead and just press S to keyframe. S on my keyboard will keyframe at this moment. You can see this little red line right here indicating that this moment has been keyed. I'm going to undo real quick because I want to show another way of doing this. The fast way is, of course, just pressing S on the keyboard, and that will key everything here to this moment in time. So at this moment in time, the sphere is at translate Y 12, and everything else is at 0, and the scale is all at 1, and the visibility is on. I can, if I want to, individually key stuff. Just by going to my channel box and right-clicking on the thing in question, in this case, translate Y, and I can just key selected. And at this point now, I can key just the Y and nothing else. But of course, for the purposes of demo, we're going to go ahead and key everything. So I'm just going to press S to key everything, including this Y here. Next, we're going to jump over to frame 12, which will be when the ball hits the ground, so 0. Now press S again. And then we can go up to frame 24 and push this back up to 12, or we can just copy and paste. And as you can see, now we have a little basic animation of our ball going up and down. Let's actually go ahead and reduce this down to 24 frames, just so that we can see the whole second play out and have it quickly loop back. Let's see. It's working, but obviously, as you can see, it's not very convincing at this moment in time. I'll also let you know, if you're seeing skipped frames on the actual video, it's playing fine on my viewport. This is just one of the unfortunate things that happens when you're recording. You might see some skipped frames in the animation, but basically it's playing fine. It just looks a little bit unrealistic at this point. I'm going to go ahead and stop it, push this back to frame 0, and let's go over how to edit our animations. We made an animation, but now we need to actually edit it to make it look better. To properly edit our animation, we're going to need access to the animation editor, the graph editor specifically. So we can do that by going up to Windows, animation editors, the graph editor right here is what we're going to be using. That's one way to open it. Of course, you can also just go to Workspace and change the workspace into the animation workspace if you wanted to. Of course, you have this vertical breakdown that you may not like. So in which case, we can go ahead and edit this again by going up to panels. We can go through layouts and have 2 panels side by side. Currently not that helpful, but we're going to keep this front-facing view. Or I should say we're going to change this to a front-facing view. That's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and go to front. There we go. That's going to be more helpful to us. And in this side, with the perspective view, we are going to go ahead and go to panel, and we're going to change this into the graph editor. And here is our animation editor here. This graph editor lets us edit our animations. And I'm going to work on it from this way, because I do enjoy this breakdown of Maya a lot. If you ever get tired of this and you want to go back to normal, then of course you can just go back to Workspace General. Or in this case, actually, you can go ahead and just go through Panels, Perspective, Panels, Layout, Single Pane, and you're back to normal. Here is our graph editor. And this is the curve that represents the animation of our bouncing ball. We currently have this sort of U situation where we have this nice slow out and then slow in at the center, slow out, slow in. We have this these nice gentle curves that are making the ball animate in the way that it is currently animating. We don't want this. This is not helpful to us. So let's go ahead and start editing. First of all, we need to isolate the specific direction that we're going to be. We need to isolate these specific graph that we want to work with. In this case, we don't want to work with translate X because we haven't done anything with translate X. Same with Z. Same with all the rotates. Same with the scales. What we want to do is focus in on just translate Y. Next, we can go ahead and select this point in the middle. We can select these points, by the way. They're all individual points. We can press F to zoom in on them. We can use the right mouse button to zoom out. We can do all the basic controls of navigating that we can in regular Maya here in the graph editor. We want to select the center point right here. And we want to select this icon right here, this linear diagonal line. And that is going to change this into a sort of a V shape. Let's go ahead and play the animation now and see what we have. It's a little better. The bounce is a little nicer, but we don't necessarily want this either. This still isn't exactly what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the animation again. And now I'm going to select these 2 points up here. And I'm going to select the icon right next to the previous icon. So we previously selected this icon, the diagonal. We're going to select this icon now for flat tangents. Didn't do that much. Let's go ahead and take a look again at what we have. Good. Good. But not perfect in this case. What we want really is we want a steeper drop-off here, I think. So I think what we want to do is go ahead and select this bottom point here, and then select one of these handles, and then just sort of make it a steeper situation so we have more of it hanging up in the air before it violently drops down to the ground really fast. But of course, you can see as I was doing that, it's affecting the other side as well, which isn't great. And if I were to do it vice versa, it's also affect this doing this will affect the other side as well, and you can never get it to the exact shape that you want, which is not great. So what do you do in this situation? In this case, you're going to want to either right-click the point and select break tangents, or you're going to want to go up here and select the icon, this icon right here, which is difficult to see in the previous setup I have, but that's the break tangents icon. If you're working in this setup, then there is the break tangents icon. Let's go back to general. Takes me back to what I had set up before. Difficult to see that break tangents icon up here, but it's okay because you can just right click on a point and you can just see break tangents right there. So now that I've broken the tangents, when I try to play with just one side, it's not going to affect the other side at all, which is great because I can now do this. That's a little better. It hangs up in the air for a moment before it very suddenly and quickly drops down and then quickly jumps back up and then hangs in the air for a moment before repeating the process all over again. That is closer to what we want for a bouncing ball. If we went a little bit too far with this, for example, let's go ahead and pause the animation and let's go ahead and push this a little bit more like this. We will see that we now have a situation where the ball is going to rise up first and then slam down to the ground, which, if this is like an animated ball, it might have a personality and it might raise itself up a little bit before slamming down to the ground. That may be what you want. In our case, we're going with something just a little bit more default and a little bit more basic, but there we have it. More stuff that we can show off. Let's go ahead and set this back to normal. So let's go ahead and look at the perspective. We have single pane to go back to normal. If I play the animation from here, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at our animation menu set here, which we're already in, but you want to make sure that if you want to have access to menu stuff, you want to be in the animation menu set. Let's go to visualize and let's go to ghost selected. This is a great representation of your animation. You can see that the blue frames here represent frames before your current frame. Your current frame is your actual model right here. The blue frames represent all the movement before your current frame, and the red frames are all the frames after. It's a great way to visualize your animations. As you can see, the ball was in very close proximity to each other for a few frames before it violently drops down very quickly for a few frames. And just a great way of representing the work in the graph editor, and just seeing the kind of movement that you have here. The blue representing that hang time where it hangs around, the red representing that violent drop and rise back up again. If you want to undo this view, you just have to select your object. And you go back to visualize, and instead of ghost selected, you select right under here, unghost selected. And now it's back to normal. Now I want to take a second and sort of replicate what your exercise is going to be for this week, which is going to be to make a basic bouncing ball like this. I'm going to go ahead and add in some more frames here. 120. Push this up to 120. We won't be using all 120 of these frames, but I do want to have more space to work with for this next part, which is going to be adding more bounces to the ball and having the bounces get progressively weaker and weaker until, the ball just stops bouncing altogether. Okay, so we have our initial bounce where we start at frame 0 at our max height of 12. We go down to height of 0 at frame 12, and then we jump back up for the same amount of time up to the translate wide of 12. I'm actually going to go ahead and change that a little bit. So let's go ahead and open up my animation menu set here, because I'm going to work in this version of the menu now. I'm going to select translate Y. I'm going to select the point right here. I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm just going to move it down 2 frames. So now my jump, so now the return jump is going to have been in 10 frames instead of 12, just like the first one. This first jump happens over the course of 12 frames, this drop here, and then the jump back up is going to happen over the course of just 10 frames. And I'm also going to lower the height a little bit. I'm holding Shift, that way I don't accidentally move my point around too much. If I were to let go, then I could start moving my point around all over the place, which wouldn't be very helpful. So holding shift allows me to control where my point is going to go. And I'm going to put it, doesn't have to be exact, around there. That's fine. And let's go ahead and get out of the animation workspace because I'm going to deal with the actual editor after I'm done with all the bounces. So I have this here. I also have this old frame still saved here. So I'm going to select frame 24. I'm going to right click and I'm going to delete. That gets rid of that unnecessary frame of animation there. And let's go ahead and add in some more. So we need to jump back down to the ground. So if it takes 10 frames to jump back up, should take 10 to reach the ground again. So at 32, it'll hit 0. I'll press S to key that frame. Next, the return height going back up in the air should take a little less frames than this one right here, than this one right here. So let's make it take 8 frames. And let's go to, we were at 10.5. Let's go to like 7. And now let's make it take 8 frames to go back down to the ground again. 0. And now to go back up, it's going to take a little less frames because it's getting weaker and weaker. Let's make it 6. Just go up to 54. And if it took 6 to go up, it should take 6 to go down. So let's go down to 60. Almost done. I think I want 2 more. So let's go ahead and go up just 4 frames. Go down in 4. And then 2 frames to go up. We'll make this just go up to 2. Or actually even weaker than that. Let's make just 1. And then 2 more frames to go down to 0 for good, and it's not going to rise back up again because the ball has been getting progressively weaker and weaker. I'm going to have this end at frame 72 because that's where our last animation is, where our last keyframe is going to be. Let's take a look at what we have. Obviously, it's not going to be clean right now because we've only done the editing work to the graph editor on this first bounce here. But we can see that the initial movement is solid. We have that initial high bounce, and then the bounces get weaker and weaker and weaker before it finally just stops altogether. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and make this 80. And frame 72. Let's have it hang there at 0 once it's all done. Okay, good. Now let's go ahead and jump into the editor again so that we can clean up our actual animation here. Let's go ahead and jump into our animation editor, the graph editor, by going to the animation menu subset here. We can see everything we have. I'm going to go ahead and select all these bottom points. I'm going to go ahead and break all their tangents. And I'm going to go ahead and just start replicating this right here, what I have for this first jump here for all the rest of them. And we're going to go ahead and test. There we go. Let's go ahead and go back to our general menu here. Pause so we can actually get that to read properly. There we go. A nice, simple bouncing ball animation. Let's add in some finishing touches. And you can see just what a massive difference having ground and lighting and shadows does for the animation in helping you read just how the ball is losing strength and becoming more and more attached to the ground before it finally just gives up and stays as part of the ground. Yeah, nice and basic little animation here. Let's discuss what we've done so far. All we've really done with this animation was specifically animate just one channel, just one direction. We've animated our Y direction, and we've only done just a few jumps, getting progressively weaker and weaker and weaker before it finally just stops altogether. This is only the barest introduction of animation. I want to stress that there is an entire animation course in this program. There are whole animation schools. Animation is such a big part of game development, of interactive media, of media in general, that you have there is just so much more to learn about this and to experience with this. And the purpose of this course of Maya Foundations is to just give you the briefest introduction to the vast majority of tools that you have at your disposal to in Maya. So animation is one of those tools. This is a very, very, very brief introduction of that tool. And if you're interested, there's going to be a lot more to come with animation. So if you like this kind of work, just be aware there are whole careers where you just work with animation and don't model anything. You just take things that have already been created, and your job is to create animations for them. It's a big thing, obviously, as you can imagine. This was only the barest introduction. You can imagine just how much more work there would be if, let me go ahead and save this actually and show you some more examples. You can imagine just how much more work there would be in other scenarios, such as having a ball with squash and stretch, that animation principle, where you squash and stretch stuff for goofier little animations like this. How much more work is involved in getting this to happen? You saw how much work was involved just to get the basic bouncing done. So you can imagine how much more there will be in adding certain controls in order to do squash and stretch, like with this volleyball scenario, or the kind of work involved to do something like having a bouncing ball, but having it bounce forward and losing steam. We only worked with one graph in one direction, the Y, but you can imagine that there is more work to be done if you work with squash and stretch, or if you work with forward momentum as well as just up and down momentum. You can also imagine the kind of work involved if you're working with multiple bouncing balls, and they have different properties from each other. You can see one here is much heavier and the other one is much lighter. The kind of work involved in that. So animation is a big deal. This week, we're just taking a look at the barest introduction to that kind of stuff. This has been just a very, very brief look at animation, how to use the animation timeline down here, how to use the animation editor, aka the graph editor, and how to work with just one direction for animation. Animation's a big deal, you can imagine. I would wholeheartedly recommend, if you are interested in animation, that you start experimenting with the timeline and with making basic animations like this bouncing ball as soon as possible. Next time, we're going to take this animation and we are going to discuss how to properly export it out and compress it for submission. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.